Congressman, welcome in.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Mark.
You're a new dad, so you understand. Dads do stuff for their kids. Your daughter probably not in need of a pardon anytime soon. How old is she now?
I have a 2.5-year-old and a 4 week old.
And how are they doing?
They're both doing well. And
Excellent.
obviously,
No pardons in the law or household necessary. Congressman, you have studied the Hunter Biden case for a long time and understand it. Is there anything you can say about this except a dad wanting to help his kid? Is there any way for you to defend this in any way, or is this just a negative across the board, as many Democrats are saying?
I think it's a negative across the board. I think obviously Joe Biden's legacy has been left in tatters this year by his decision to run for reelection and now this. And obviously Democrats losing the White House and the Senate on the way out the door. So I think this just is the icing on the cake, if you will. And look, everyone can understand from the perspective of a father. And Joe Biden, obviously, his family means the world to him, and I respect that. But I think everybody sees beyond this, which is number one, he lied repeatedly to the American people about the fact that he, quote unquote, would not give his son a pardon. His staff repeatedly lied to the American people about it. And ultimately, I think what is jarring, beyond the fact that he's obviously pardoning Hunter Biden for the crimes he was convicted, tax evasion and the gun possession with respect to filling out the form. But the fact is he's pardoning him over an 11-year period, which covers the time period by which the House Oversight Committee was investigating the foreign dollars that flowed to the tune of $24 million to the Biden family through 20 shell companies, and really blows a hole through Joe Biden's claims in the 2020 presidential debate, in which he said that his son never received any money from China. And that was a straight up lie. And he knew it to be a lie and yet said it repeatedly. And I think the fact that he decided to pardon him for an 11-year period is to me the most jarring aspect. And the last thing I'd say is in his statement, he basically says that the Department of Justice has been weaponized, that it's been politicized. From his standpoint, he feels that his son was getting a fair plea deal that was blown up by political pressure. But the fact is that he basically admits that his Department of Justice has been politicized and weaponized. And I think it goes to something that I believed fundamentally, which is that the American people should determine who our next president is. And obviously, in this election, they spoke and they elected Donald Trump overwhelmingly, both by popular vote and winning every single swing state in the Electoral College, despite 4 indictments, 34 felony count conviction, a civil bankruptcy proceeding, basically, in which the Attorney General of New York tried to bankrupt him and go after his assets. And yet the American people elected him. And so to me, I think if Joe Biden felt as strongly about this with regards to his son as he clearly dwelled on for a very long time, then he should have recognized the catastrophe of indicting a former president who had announced his candidacy for president again, and should have put an end to it before it ever got started.
Congressman's here for a little bit tonight to talk about this. So if you'd like to ask him a question about Joe Biden's decision to pardon Hunter, please raise your hand. If you've got your hand up with another question, go ahead and put it down for now. We'll have time for other topics later. But again, if you want to be able to ask the congressman a question about this topic, please raise your hand. I don't want to sound either naive or cynical, but politicians lie all the time. Presidents lie all the time, right? And presidents do stuff for their families all the time. So is it possible that this is not as big a deal as the breathless commentary of the last day suggests? Or if you were talking to some civics class, you would say, here's why it is fundamentally a big deal, bigger than normal lying, normal taking care of their families?
Look, obviously, presidents have issued pardons before, and there's always been controversy surrounding some of the more high-profile ones. And, they get attention. I think this one is obviously very unique, given the circumstances. I think, given what happened this year with Joe Biden, frankly, making a very selfish decision to run for reelection, the White House and members of the press and the Democratic Party gaslighting the entire nation about his cognitive abilities and his health overall. And then, obviously, ultimately, him dropping out, the Democrats losing in election to Donald Trump, despite all the claims that, he would be the greatest threat to democracy, comparisons to Hitler, and so on. And then obviously on his way out the door now, pardoning his son after adamantly saying that he would never do so. I think given the calamity and the totality of it all, I do think this will leave a lasting negative impression on Joe Biden.
Oh,
And the last thing I'd say is the other thing that is kind of going around congressional circles right now is the fact that this pardon eliminates basically the Fifth Amendment protections against Hunter Biden with respect to self-incrimination, and basically allows Congress to call him as a witness to the specifics of the foreign dollars that flowed through 20 shell companies to the tune of $24 million, and in one instance, ultimately worked their way into Joe Biden's bank account. And I think, obviously, Hunter Biden at some point is probably going to have to answer questions about that as a witness, given that he no longer has to worry about self-incrimination.
and if he perjured himself, then that wouldn't be covered by the pardon because the pardon ended on December 1st. So
Correct.
he would be compelled to tell the truth. All right. Last question. Part of why Joe Biden was not held accountable for the actions that he took and his lies about those actions connected to Biden Inc. was the incompetence, I say respectfully, of some of your colleagues in failing, I think, to run the kind of investigation they needed to. But they were up against what I think is the main reason, which is for reasons both obvious and not clear, the media was not interested in covering a fantastic story, right? So that even today, in some of the stories about Hunter Biden, it says there's no evidence that Joe Biden did anything wrong in helping Hunter Biden. Well, there is. I mean, start with lying in the debate and saying he never took money from China, which he knew wasn't true. Start with him flying Hunter around on Air Force Two to do business deals and then claiming he had no knowledge of his son's business. Start with him going to meetings with Hunter's business associates or potential business associates. And then, of course, there's the dollars that flowed to the Biden family, which every grandfather in the world would be happy to help get money for his grandkids. It doesn't have to go into Joe's bank account first. That's just what we know. So my question to you is going forward, forget party identification. What can be done with people in my business to keep them from being afraid of covering a story? What can your party do better? What can the media do better so we don't go through this again? It doesn't mean Donald Trump has never done anything wrong, but we had an incumbent president for 4 years who was let off the hook by the goalposts constantly moving. So the press feels entitled to continue to write no evidence he did anything wrong, Congressman.
Well, I think the media, unfortunately, was so invested in and hell bent on making sure Donald Trump never became president again, that they let all objectivity fly out the door. And the fact is that the investigation really did show a few basic things that, at minimum, were disturbing and warranted actual scrutiny and investigation by the press. And to me, number one, when Joe Biden said very clearly and definitively that his family never received any funds from China and that was a lie, that was, in fact, a lie. They did. And the documents, the bank records show, the suspicious activity reports show that over $24 million flowed from China, Russia, Ukraine, and Romania to the Biden family. And in fact, the money at one point was transferred from a Chinese entity to a shell company owned by Hunter and James Biden, then transferred to a shell company owned by James and Sarah Biden. Then money was transferred to a personal checking account to James and Sarah Biden, and then a personal check was written to Joe Biden immediately. And that occurred while he was out of office, but it raised serious questions that the media kept saying, "Oh, there's no evidence." I
Well,
mean, the
Congressman,
evidence was very clear.
you've laid out the facts. Just give me, I don't want to go to folks'
Yeah.
questions. Give me one, best practice. How can we keep this from happening again? What's something that could be changed that would keep this from happening?
Look, I go on every single network. I talk to every reporter of every persuasion because I think that is critically important. I think the media has to be sincere in questioning every single elected official fairly, not gratuitously, but fairly, and seriously ask questions and not just continually take talking points from one party over the other or push one agenda over the other. The media is critical to holding elected officials to account, informing the public. And I think after the last, I would say, decade, the credibility of the media is completely shot. From the Russia investigation to this investigation to Joe Biden's mental capacity and the fact that they continually gaslit any discussion of that to obviously this most current situation with the pardon. I think it is imperative that the media get back to a very fundamental, basic premise of journalism 101. Be skeptical and ask everybody tough questions. Don't try to slant it one way or the other.
Amen. All right. Richard Sussman, welcome in. Question for the congressman about the Hunter Biden pardon, please.
Wow, it didn't expect this to happen.
It's a great country. Anything can happen. Here you are face to face.
That's why two-way is terrific.
Yeah, facing the credibility challenges of Russiagate, COVID, the senility, this election, do you think the media holds weight going forward in the political conversations, that they have the power that they used to have in swaying political opinion?
Great question. Thank you, Richard. Congressman.
I think it's a fundamental question to our political debate, and I think the answer is no. I think the American people have lost great trust in our institutions, and frankly, for good reason. Whether you're talking about the Department of Justice and the FBI, whether you're talking about the Department of Health, and here in New York under Andrew Cuomo, we saw so many things happen that turned out not to be true. And you look obviously at the media, and I think they did themselves such damage because they allowed personal animus to cloud the coverage. And whatever you want to say about Donald Trump, whether you like him, dislike him, the fact is he's probably one of the most consequential political figures in American history. And to win a second term, given everything that was thrown at him, and some of it, his own doing, but given everything that has been thrown at him, the fact is that he was elected to another term by a larger majority with larger support than he had the first time around. And I think the American people saw through a lot of the nonsense that the media was reporting. It doesn't mean that there aren't accurate things that they report about him, or there aren't fair questions that they raise with respect to Donald Trump. There are. But continually, they allowed their vitriol to cloud the coverage, and they did not hold Democrats to the same standard. And this notion that Democrats are, quote unquote, protecting democracy when they have no problem undermining democracy when it suits their purpose. And I'll give you a case in point. Letitia James literally campaigned on prosecuting Donald Trump. When she ran for attorney general, she said, I am going to go after Donald Trump. That is so disqualifying for the chief law enforcement officer of a state. And she did it. She followed through on it. And yet yesterday I was on CNN and the question was, are you concerned about Kash Patel and Pam Bondi going after Donald Trump's political enemies? And I'm like sitting to myself saying, well, sure, I'm concerned about the weaponization of the Department of Justice, but how come you weren't concerned when that role was reversed? Why weren't you demanding that Letitia James answer questions or recuse herself, given what she had said? And so there's where I think there needs to be, the double standard needs to end, and people need to in the press need to hold everybody to the same standard if they are going to be taken seriously going forward.
Richard, thank you. Come back, please, regularly. All right, let's see if we can get one more quick question before the congressman has to go. Mark Ackerman, floor is yours for the congressman. Oh, can't hear you, Mark. You're unmuted, but we cannot hear you. Give it one more try. Congressman, while he works on that, I want to ask you a question. You praise Kash Patel's nomination. He's talked about prosecuting journalists. Is that something you'd like to see the FBI and the Justice Department do? Prosecute journalists?
No, I look, I think ultimately the temperature here has to come down. I think obviously Kash Patel, when he goes and does his confirmation, will be asked lots of questions, I'm sure, by many of the senators, and he should be, and he should be able to forthwithly answer them, and I'm sure he will. At the end of the day, to me, the Department of Justice and the FBI need to get back to their mission. The fact that most people associate DOJ and FBI with politics today is a problem. Just the mere optics of that is a problem. And so I think the objective of Kash Patel and of Pam Bondi has to be to get back to the basics of what the role of the DOJ and the FBI is, to focus on crime, to focus on counterterrorism measures, to focus on prosecuting the drug cartels, and to really restore trust and faith in our judicial system. A revenge tour should not be on the agenda. I do think if there were people involved in official actions that broke the law, then certainly held accountable. And if there warrants investigation, that's fine. But at the end of the day, this should not be about just going after every critic of the president, including in the press.
All right, Chris Simmons is a Democrat from Georgia. Chris, we have exactly a minute left before the congressman has to go. So if you want in, you're going to have to ask him like a 20-second question, 40-second answer, and we wish him farewell. Are you up for a 20-second question?
I can do it.
Go ahead.
So my question, Congressman, is that do you see any difference between weaponization as defined as you go after somebody and you look for a crime they may have committed because they oppose you politically, or what I would describe as a difference in the Letitia James case, where she promised the voters to go after somebody that most Americans think they actually saw commit a crime on January 6th?
So,
all right, Congressman.
Fair question. But when Letitia James said those things, it was 2018, long before January 6th. And she campaigned fully as part of the quote unquote resistance to prosecute Donald Trump and to find a crime. She didn't know what she was looking for. And ultimately what she came up with was that he falsified loan documents and claims that he overvalued his assets. And yet the banks said very clearly, we're not victims. The bank said he paid us back in full on time, and we are not claiming that he broke the law or that he somehow did wrong by us. And yet she still went ahead and tried to bankrupt him, basically, and seize all of his funds and assets. And I just think fundamentally, if you're a Democrat, you should be angriest at Letitia James and Alvin Bragg, because I think they did more to elect Donald Trump to a second term than anybody in the country. I think going after him in the manner in which they did on the charges that they did really were a disservice to the criminal justice system. It was a disservice to the rule of law. It was a disservice to New Yorkers. And I think ultimately they did more damage to Democrats because I think most Americans, if they were not unhinged about Donald Trump, they took a step back and said, wait a minute, this isn't justice. This isn't right. And I think that backfired significantly.
Chris Simmons, thank you. Congressman, I know you got to go. Say hi to Mehek Cook. Not impossible. You two will be the Republican presidential and vice presidential tickets someday. So I just want everybody to take a quick look. New York and Ohio together, very powerful. Congressman, grateful to you for making time. We hope you'll come back to two-way on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Congressman.